Next talk is from the lovely Martin. He's going to talk to you about some projects that he's been working on or has worked on in the past in Denmark. Martin's also one of our exhibiting artists, so thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I just press the next here? There we are. Okay. Next one. This is it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much for inviting me to do this talk. I won't be talking, or try to avoid to talk too much about my own work, but rather, and not works as such, but rather the framework around works and the kind of life we have and lead as artists working in these materials. Natalie suggested me to talk specifically about a couple of galleries that I have been involved with over the years, and I'm very pleased to do that, but I think that we have to begin a little bit further back on doing that. So I will be specifically, I'll be talking about artist-run exhibition spaces and venues in Denmark, which is a long tradition, and specifically later on come to focus specifically on the Copenhagen Ceramics project and the Peachcorner Gallery, which is the one that's now in existence. But I want to go back to this. And thank you, Paul, for paving a little bit the way here, because you already touched on many of those names that we're going to look at here. This is the exhibition building of the so-called Free Exhibition. And as you can see, it was formed in 1891. And as you probably know, it was sort of a movement in Europe where artists were revolting against sort of stiffened procedures around being part of the annual academic exhibitions and those kinds of things. And notably the French system of the Salon de Réfugiés, which was sort of an inspiration and brought out a kind of wish to rebel among young artists at that time. So the Free was a result of that, and formed in 1891 by, for instance, J.F. Willemsen. Jens Willemsen was certainly a very important figure there, and also Wilhelm Hammershøi, with the painter who is now very known, but some years later a more secret life, and some others. And they formed this group, and the first year from 1891 to 1903 they were showing in an art dealer's spaces in Vesterbro in Copenhagen. And then in 1893 they had the first building made, which was a wooden pavilion actually designed by Thorvald Bindesbø. And that was situated where the town hall is now, sort of next to where Tivoli is, but was there for about 7 years until 1898, when it was forced, they were forced to pull it down because they were going to build that new town hall. So then J.F. Willemsen designed this building, another wooden pavilion. If you know the building in Vienna, the Viennese Secession building, you can tell there's some similarities in style and inspiration. So the pavilion here is based on sort of a Greek and not least Egyptian kind of elements, stylistic elements. And then of course on the top it had this wooden relief, gilded, of the young artist riding on Pegasus as a symbol of it all. It was in that venue, right next to where the Copenhagen Central Station is now, from 1898 until 1914, and then they pulled it down again because then we're going to do some expanding on the railway station, and it was taken down bit by bit and then moved over to where it is actually now, in just opposite Østerport station in Copenhagen. So the building was put up, and it's been there for 110 years now. It's still this very old, very special wooden building. And this is sort of the central exhibition space there. You can see the light is fantastic in there and so on. It's such a part of Danish art life, that building, because it's housed that group called the Free, that group of artists, which of course over the years have been replaced with other artists, and they have all been exhibiting there. And So it's something, sometimes when you think of Danish art exhibitions, you just immediately sort of associate with that building, because this is where we've seen so much. In the beginning, obviously, you can imagine that it had plants and stools and even stoves in there for the early exhibitions. You can tell also from the poster here, from one of the early exhibitions, that they were very aware of international connections. Actually, in the 1893 exhibition, they invited Gauguin and Van Gogh, and Gauguin came with 8 new images from his work in Tahiti. And I don't know if that was where he met his wife or it happened before, but they were they were really regarded as avant-garde and daring in the choice of artists they were showing early on. And you can tell from the poster that you see, they've written it all, where to find it in all these 3 languages, French, English and German and Danish. So it's important to remember they were always looking out. But of course, as soon as a group is formed, it very quickly comes some kind of disagreements, and this also happened with the free exhibition. So already in 1915, a group started another association of artists, which is called Groningen, which is the name of where that pavilion was situated. And as you can tell here, this was another pavilion that was put up really quickly to house that exhibition. And it was popularly called the Indian hut. You can tell the patterns that are sort of inspired by American, North American, Indian patterns. And was there for not very many years when then another city development plans came across. So actually in the 1920s, if we jump up to that, the free building was then also where the Groningen exhibition would be shown. And they were basically annual exhibitions. Every year people would work towards this exhibition, and then people would every year come and see what they were presented now. And that went on for ages and ages. And then in the 20s and beginning of the 30s, more groups came that often also exhibited in this space. Yeah, and here is just a quick shot of the Charlottenborg Exhibition Hall, which is an exhibition building. This is the one with all the green plants on it, that were built very early 1880s as an extension to the castle where the Royal Academy of Fine Arts is, which is where it still is, at the central square in Copenhagen. And this was sort of, again, for many years, a venue where you would have these shifting exhibitions. Sometimes they were curated, and often they were artist-led. People were part of a group, and they were deciding which work do I want to show this year for that group. So it was also, and commercially it was also where often it happened. Selling work was happening in those circles. And in the late 20s, a group called Coloristerne, the colorists, started, and then in the beginning of the 30s, you had Decembrist and another group. And these are all existing groups still, obviously not with the same artists. So here in 2009, suddenly there was a decision to not continue this tradition of those groups showing in Charlottenborg Castle, there was a wish to make it an independent art exhibition hall with its own program, its own director, and so on. And this of course caused uproar. So in 2009, you had this sort of squatting of the building, barring people from entering it by these artist groups. And that was sort of mainly, but the people behind it, the politicians who had advocated this stood steadily, and the groups had to leave. So in that same round, the free exhibition became also part of a sort of a larger structure in the art life in Copenhagen, where they now are showing, the group, the free, is showing once a year, and the rest of the time it's also curated exhibitions by different people who are, and there's a direction and so on. And so it's no longer the artists who are actually running the program so much. But they actually still, and that's a very important part, they actually still own the building. All these artists that are now members of the free are the ones who have a share in that building. So, turning to ceramics and jumping forward quite a bit, I just want to point also to a couple of venues that have been very important in that context. And Gallery Nørby is sort of a very important one that was initiated in 1992 and went on until for 15 years until 2007. And this was a specialist gallery for ceramics, but a very broad scope of work. As you could tell, this is probably a show around 2000, I would say, by Bente Skutgaard over here. And up here you have Marianne Nielsen, a show maybe a bit later. But if you think of the work that was shown there, often the vessel would be really, really a big portion of it in all sorts of ways. And Bente Skutgaard already, you just saw some other images of what she's doing now, but at that time she was always into glazes and creating shapes that would allow the glazes to perform, you could say. So that was a very important venue, and when that was closed, it was like a gap. That was like, okay, where do you go if you're interested? You come to Copenhagen, where do you go if you're interested in ceramics? There really was a lack of space there. And we were sort of a little homeless for a little while. And just to conclude the Gallery Nørby story, this is one of the sort of memorable exhibitions. A couple of young, newly graduated students made this fashion show where they made all sorts of hairstyles of ceramic bowls. And they had this catwalk, and they had a Sprechstalmeister, and they had music and all of it. And it was attracted a lot of people, and something that we all remember really well, that show. And they've sort of kept on doing all sorts of very different stuff. You could say, making a career out of using clay in a very, very different way. And here's just mention a few other venues that are important. And Linnemann Studio Gallery, which existed until recently, was initiated by Anne Linnemann herself and was just a space really next to her studio that she ran a program of sometimes about up to 10 exhibitions a year. So it was really regular showing and a venue where you could follow what went on. And then there's this space where the photograph is from, which is this Officinet, which is the space that belongs to the Association of Danish Craftsmen and Designers, which is now functions on an open call basis where you can apply to do an exhibition. Køber Contemporary Objects. Bettina Køber was actually sort of the last director of the Gallery Nørby, and then made her own gallery with a friend in a space very close to the Design Museum in Copenhagen. And that existed for a couple of years. I think she probably started in 2007, and then it had to close down some years later. And then she made another one, and now since 2021, she operates from the island of Bornholm. So when you get off the ferry in Rønne, in the largest city of Bornholm, her gallery is really just up from there. So Copenhagen Ceramics, which is a project I was involved in, started in 2012, and this was again a moment where we really felt that we had to do something, initiate something on our own, because again we couldn't really point to where people should go, and we had become so used to having this place you could always tell people go and see exhibitions there. So we were discussing this and for quite a while, and I was kept sort of objecting to it. I was teaching part-time and had my hands full of all sorts of stuff apart from my own practice as well. So I was sort of very hesitant to sort of accept going into it. But at the end we decided, we're going to do a year. Let's find a space and rent it, and then we'll do an exhibition program of 7 or 8 exhibitions for that 1 year, and then we'll see how it goes. And so we did, and here's a little bit sort of about how we formulated what we were about. And already we began in 2012. Well, maybe we should take 11 first, because this is what it looked like, what we took over in this old. Let me see, the house behind us here. We were on 2nd floor, and you entered the door just behind Sten here, and Bente in the middle, and myself. So this was what it looked like. A lot of elbow grease and the usual stuff. But we kept that stairways because everyone thought that was just amazing that you would still find a stairway. It hadn't been painted since 1920, and the steps were completely worn. And you had to go up two levels, and then you would enter this sort of bright white space. And we really got to love that staircase, but the rest we changed, obviously. Yeah. So in 2012 we were ready to open, and the first show was by Anders Roval in January 2012, and after that came a show with Bente Skøtgaard and Bodil Mans together. You could say that the kind of idea we had of how to run this space was there were several rules, obviously, but one was that we were not going to discuss this old debate of crafts versus fine arts or any of that at all. We were not going to mention it at all. So we sat down, and then we thought of people that we would like to invite. And of course, at the time, because there were not a lot of other choices, people would generally accept our invitation, even if we coupled often artists with each other without asking them why, or if they wanted to, we'd just say, okay, we have invited you two together, and would you want to participate? Yes, of course. So that was sort of always very interesting to see how that would actually turn out, because I mean, in some cases people would actually collaborate about using that space, and in other cases you just had like two exhibitions next to each other, which also would work. But it was really up to the artists themselves. The procedure was that we were organizing everything around advertising and having work photographed, running a website that actually got very, very much more popular than we had ever imagined, which still exists, that you can check. Of those exhibitions we made at that time, but and then the artists themselves had to actually take care of exhibition while it went on, which would normally be about 4 weeks or sometimes 5, and so for the three of us, we stayed just the three of us because we quite soon discovered what we were good at. And I did all the press work, writing for that. Bente was really good with the computer, sorting all that. Sten was good with economy. And we would sit then down annually and make all the applications to funds, so on, to run the whole thing. So it was sort of very swift. We operated really swiftly, which meant that you would have sort of every month you would have a couple of really busy weeks, and then after that it was a break for 2 weeks where there was nothing, and then you would start the next thing. So it really got into a rhythm very soon. And already in the first year, this is another show quite early on where we invited this group of 6 artists who work with cake stands, was the choice of object, and they had a kind of system where they invited each other to create cake stands according to their instructions. So we ended up with this sort of huge amount of them in all sorts of ways. And had for the opening a very, very famous sort of cake store in Copenhagen to talk about and open that show. Anyway, already in May, in the month of May, we were sort of realized that we actually quite enjoyed this project, and we thought, okay, if we're going to continue next year, we have to invite people now, so they'd have time to work. And so we decided to do another year, and then. Yeah, on from there, and then it actually ended up doing it 3 years in a row. And at the end of, I have to talk about this exhibition space. That was sort of the first year, the December exhibition in the first year by an artist, Christine Johansson. And this is a very memorable one for us, especially because she really quite went crazy there. With her exhibition, there was this story. The story was about a kind of a Rococo fictitious person called Augustine, who lived here and had all her sorts of objects around. And actually, during the exhibition and the opening, she would sit in that little tent structure on the bed, writing her poems and being very introverted. And while people were walking around in the straw But the thing is, if you remember that stairways, and the back stairs were also very narrow and not really accessible, we were dead scared when that exhibition went on. It was full of people and it was straw all over the place. And we were so lucky and happy when it was all over, that opening, when nothing had caught fire. And there were musicians, there were snake people doing things around. It was crazy. So you know, ceramic can go far in all sorts of directions. Yeah, and here's another few glimpses of other exhibitions. Belgian artist Jesse Ballemans that we invited. Yeah, and you know, obviously people were really into using the space very differently. It was a fairly simple space with two windows to both north and south, and just this white space really. And maybe you notice that most of the images I have from there are taken from the same angle, because this was really the only angle where you could photograph the space. Well, this exhibition was a group exhibition between Ole Jensen and Gladys with the hats or the hairstyles, and they made this exhibition called The Opening, which was about opening of exhibitions. So for the opening here, we were all invited to use whatever was there. So we drank wine out of that pile of porcelain glasses over there. You could walk up to the wall and you could test different kinds of alcohol here from taking those bottles down. And of course the whole thing was open with a speech, someone on that podium there. And later on in the evening, because there were all these beer mugs on the wall and we had a beer kind of machine installed, so it also got quite a long evening, I would say, and vivid evening. And it ended up someone standing on the podium singing for us all. So it was great. And what would I want to say with this now? I can't forget. Anyway, we'll go on. Yeah. So at the end of 2014, and after having shown 27 exhibitions there, we decided it was time to close it down, and that had sort of there were different reasons. I mean, partly because we were sort of thinking, now we're getting into a routine with this, and maybe it's time really now to think differently. And also that we knew that it would get increasingly more difficult to raise money for it. So we decided, okay, we'll stop it while it's fun, and then that's it. And then we had got so fond of the cooperation between us that we thought, okay, we don't need to sort of dissolve the group. We can just sort of wait and see. Maybe we get an idea for doing something later on, which we then did, and actually then later until last year, where we decided to really stop completely, we did different exhibitions abroad. This one was in Italy during the Salone in Milan in 2016, where we also launched a book showing all the exhibitions we had made in the gallery. And this is just really where the gallery space that we rented for that week, Salvatore Lanteri Gallery. And here's a couple of glimpses from that space, where we invited 7 Danish artists to show that. A couple of Morten's work in the space, large vases. Yeah, and it was fun again, you know, the kind of activity that the Milan Fair with lots of different people there for this week would then suddenly open what we were doing to different people. In 2019 we made an exhibition at the Clay Museum that we called Ceramic Momentum, Stating the Object, where we invited people from abroad as well. There were mainly Danish people, but quite a large group also of people from different places. And it had to do a little bit with what we were talking also about, Paul, the fact that what is this national identity kind of thing, that we're so used to talking about Danish ceramics as so and so, and Norwegian or American or British for that matter, and so on. And really, is that still valid in the time of the internet, where everything is accessible? So it was really about asking that question and letting people sort of see for themselves what kind of statement they or what they would get out of that. And stating the object, we took that quite literally and invited an architect to really stage everything as a kind of reflection also on the way that we stage ourselves on the net as well, through Instagram and so on and so forth. So it's about that. So the show didn't really have a beginning or an end. It was really just a lot of different objects brought together, everything set in its own setting, and there were points Maybe I'll talk about that in a moment. This is sort of the entrance of the exhibition. You can see all the names that were in the show there, and this is a work by Martin Bodilsen, American artist, that the museum then fortunately acquired at the time, which was really great for us, because it's always a lot of awkwardness around inviting people from afar, and then nothing happens, and we bring it all back again. So they acquired this, and it's now in front of the museum. Here are some other glimpses from the show. And you can tell all these walls in different colors, different materialities were really part of the whole thing. Here we have sort of mirrors behind these works of Steen to sort of completely exaggerate the whole effect of these really already very busy looking works. So it was really kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of setting up. And all sorts of levels, workflow levels, and you'd have sort of running through the whole thing, you'd have these brown MDF kind of boards barring you from the side at times. You sort of had to turn a corner to see the next part of the exhibition. Here was work by Takuro Kuwata, which took us 8 years to get through his gallery, but we managed to get this little collection of beautiful small, quite classic T-poles when you think about what most of his work is much more expressive and violent. So, but these were very beautiful work there. And here Marianne Nielsen, sort of a collection of objects that were sort of pairs. You could see she works with the plants, parts of plants, and then she works on the structure of the plants, sort of turns them into a kind of geometric scheme almost. And this is some measures about 2 meters wide and 150 high, I would say. Christina Skov Christensen, who works with these containers where she lets a glaze during the firing actually form the shape and constitute those stems and feet. Anders Roval, and again the blue piece which is in the show here was there as well. Things move around. Yeah, and you can tell again the kind of feeling of the show in that space. Linda Sorman was invited also and did this piece, which was also acquired by the museum, which was really great. And here's sort of a little bit a look down across the room. It was very discussed. I mean, some people hated that setup, the whole kind of over-dramatized installation. But I thought it was still interesting in the sense that you really had to find your own way. There wasn't a structure in that exhibition. You could start wherever you wanted to and work through. And this was the final exhibition we made. After the exhibition at the Clay Museum, we did a tour, the three of us, to the States, visiting museums and galleries. And one of the first galleries we were talking to in New York were the Hostel Burroughs galleries. And they were ready to cooperate right away, so we actually started a cooperation with them, which has really evolved over the years. And this was a show in a gallery on 10th Street. And since then they've opened another gallery in Tribeca where we are also showing more sort of solo exhibitions or individual exhibitions. Quite a few Danish artists are working with them now, and other Scandinavians as well. Yeah, so here Peachcorner, and I think I have to hurry a little bit, but Peachcorner is sort of the latest branch on the tree, and it was started in 2021 by, again, Bente Skutgaard is a crucial person because she can't see a vacant space without wanting to make a gallery out of it. And this was just down the road from where she's working, and actually our Copenhagen Ceramics gallery was just behind. So we're in the same area of Copenhagen, the area called Frederiksberg. So this is the space, and Peachcorner, you can tell why it's Peachcorner. This is the color of the house, and this is the logo, and so on. And I just, yeah, you can check the peachcorner.dk website and then get an overview of the many exhibitions that's already been shown there. It has normally 7 exhibitions a year, and again, we're 12 this time running it, which also means that we are actually taking care of it ourselves, the artists themselves. About once a month, you sit there and you watch it. And the other thing that's characteristic here is that it's a very, very a good mix of newly graduated people, young people, and then me as the oldest probably. So we're having lots of fun out of that, because it means also that the public, the audience who comes, vary a lot. I mean, sometimes they're none over 40, and other times they're nearing 80, depending on who we're showing. And that mix is really interesting. So I'll just show you here quickly some images of some of the exhibitions we made. Yeah, we'll skip this as well. This is really just what the, again, the little mini manifesto kind of thing. You can read that on the website as well if you wish. Yeah, this is the space. The gallery space is not very big. It's about 25 square meters, 270 square feet. You enter by the corner door, and then there's a stairways, a few steps up, and then you go into another back space where we call the Wunderkammer, and I'll show you an image in a moment about that. This space is then completely open to the people we invite to do whatever they want with it. And we've had many different answers to that. This was one of the first exhibitions, a couple of artists working with 3D printed work and playing around with that. Bente Skutgaard and Damgaard did this joint show and Damgaard working with dresses, and they had this common theme of subsea elements like seaweed and life in the sea as a common theme, and then they had this video or all these images of sort of feeling that you were underwater in the background, tying it all together or like that. Here we invited German Johannes Nagel and Swedish Karl-Richard Söderström for sort of rather somber kind of exhibition, could say. So I felt that I was curating it. I felt that I had to sort of put the pink in to sort of somehow do a little contrary movement to the work there. Linda Sorman and Karen Hasbo, who is the teacher at a professor at the Fine Art Academy, running the ceramic workshop there, which has now become extremely popular with the fine artists. They are all working in ceramics due to her. She's collaborated several times with Linda Sorman from Canada, and Linda did some years before this a big installation exhibition where she sort of builds the sculpture, yeah, in situ. Another piece here, I'll finish very quickly. Beautiful poetic exhibition by Petra Dahlström on those sort of almost invisible little structures of osmosis, water taken via a little thread dropping down on this, and then, you know, a little movement, very quiet, beautiful piece. Caroline Slotte from Finland and Gitte Jongersen together. This is a close-up of one of Caroline's pieces. And again, Hilda Piazzolla, another show on her own, this time later work, 3D printed work. And Malene Møllert, who's sort of one of the older ladies, grand ladies of Danish ceramics, who's always experimenting after 60 years of ceramics, did a show last year. And Sarah Möller from Sweden built this structure in the gallery space of unfired materials, sort of lingering between erecting and falling down, really, the clay materials. Certain parts were fired, but most of it wasn't. And here's the last piece, last exhibition last year, where the theme was inhold, which means content. So it was all about ways that containers exist and are more or less abstraction on the vessel. And they were old and new pieces, sort of all mixed together. So striped pieces of mine, sort of 20 years back in it too. So, and this was curated by Ole Jensen and Gitte Jongersen. And this is the show that's on now. Jeppe Søndergaard, one of the younger artists who's been working with, the exhibition is called Bonding, but he's been working with what is not the brick, but what's between the brick, and all those patterns and all those invisible structures. And to conclude, this is the Wunderkammer area, where we then have displays of work for about 40 artists that we then change around, and generally we have the work for at least half a year, and then people put in new work, and so it's sort of a mixture. The gallery space and this works well. We mostly sell work from this area, but the combination is good. Okay, I'm overdue, I think. So thanks very much for listening.